Here are 10 expensive watches that are actually worth buying. Let's begin with Zenith Defy El Primero 21. This was the hottest watch of 2017. When it came out, it made a lot of headlines, and to this day it remains one of the best watches in its price segment. Since 2017, there were a few different versions released of this watch. You can get it in a ceramic case. You could also get it in a grade 5 titanium case. Both versions come in a 44mm case, which is actually pretty reasonable for the amount of complications that you receive with this watch. For some reason, these watches never became as popular as I think Zenith was hoping they would. And for that reason, you can buy them on gray market, on the used market, well under the retail price, well under $10,000. I've seen these watches for as low as $7,500. For this price, you get a lot of value. As I already mentioned, the case is made out of grade 5 titanium, which makes it very light and comfortable watch to wear. You could also choose between a leather strap or an integrated titanium bracelet. I would actually go for the titanium bracelet option and then buy a strap afterwards. Besides the case, the rest of the watch is also really cool. You get this skeletonized dial. Looking at this dial right here, looking at the movement at the back, of course, this one is featuring El Primero, a legendary chronograph movement that has been modified. It's actually sort of two movements in one. One movement is for the main timekeeping. The other movement with a separate regulator, with a separate power reserve, with a separate escapement is designed purely for the chronograph. And this chronograph measures 1/100th of a second if you're quick enough to stop it. That's just mind-boggling. The amount of technology, the amount of innovation packed into this watch is great. And getting it all for under $10,000, the same price as a Submariner, it's just incredible value for money. It's just an incredible watch. It's not only a spec list, it actually is a pretty good watch. One of the big sort of measurements of how good the watch is how easy it is to fake a watch. And this one here is almost impossible to fake. If a faker wanted to fake this watch, it would cost them almost as much money as they could get for this timepiece. So that's a true mark of kind of something special, something that you get and you can admire, something that's gonna last a lifetime. I really like these watches, and who knows, maybe in the future I'll pick one up. Actually, there's a few watches on this list that I'm hoping to pick up in the future. Like the next one, Sin U50. The thing about diver watches, it's difficult to make one stand out. There are just so many different watches in the sea, pun intended, of diver watches that it's hard to make something special. It's hard to make something different. However, I think this German brand Sin really succeeded at making something special, making something that's actually worth your money. U50 is not your run-of-the-mill standard diver watch. With a price tag of only around $2,700 US, you get quite a bit of value. First of all, you get SW300 automatic movement. All right, nothing really special about that. The movement is not the standout feature of this watch, unlike it was in the Zenith. The standout feature of this watch is actually the case and the case toughness. The watch features 500 meters of water resistance, and usually watches that have such high levels of water resistance are, a brick on your wrist. Not the case with this one. It's only 11.2 millimeters thick. It also has a reasonable diameter of about 41 millimeters, so it's a very wearable watch for your daily use. Now, the case and the bracelet are made out of submarine steel, and in a lot of cases it would be a little bit of marketing fugazi. Submarine steel, what the hell is that even? But not in the case of Sin. I've seen these watches that are 5-6 years old, not this specific model, but other Sin watches that were really enjoyed by their users. In other words, watches that were kind of abused. And guess what? They looked almost brand new. The way Sin finishes their watches, their hardening of steel is next level. These watches are the types of watches that you would buy to really wear it around the shop, to wear it gardening, things like that, and it can take it, and in a few years' time, it will look almost brand new. It's another one of those watches that I really want to add to my collection at some point, and I think it's worth a serious consideration if you're looking to spend under $3,000 for a diver watch. Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch. All right, let's just get this one out of the way. I think if you watched my channel for long enough, you probably have assumed that this watch is going to make an appearance. We have an iconic status, rich history, and very unique and functional design. What else do you need from a watch? I think this watch makes a very good case for being one of the best watches ever made. The Speedy is not necessarily a spec list, it's not necessarily a great finishes list, it just has a combination of everything. And in 2020, this model has been updated. Yes, the prices did go up a little bit. I think nowadays you can score them on the gray market for well under the retail. You could also probably get a discount at your ADs. So what was updated? Well, we got a new caliber movement, 3861, so it's a MADAS certified movement, a coaxial MADAS certified movement, I should add. You also get an updated stainless steel bracelet. This bracelet is an improvement over the old bracelet. My watch still features the old movement, the old bracelet. I still love it. I think it's a great value, but these new ones, undeniably, the bracelet is better. It fits better, especially if you have a small wrist. It's just a little bit more flowy. It hugs your wrist nicer. So once again, Speedmaster, it's not really breaking too much ground. It's not really making anything crazy in terms of engineering. It's just a good, solid watch that I think if you were to buy, you're not going to regret. Unlike the next entry on the list that actually has a lot of impressive engineering and impressive finishes, etc, etc, etc. I'm talking about Grand Seiko, the Snowflake. There's a number of Grand Seiko watches that I could have put in this list and they would belong here. But I think none of them deserve a spot on this list like a Snowflake does. I think it was the first one to really break out into the mainstream, to really put Grand Seiko on the radar of a lot of watch collectors. Now, personally, I have a great connection with this watch. I actually wore one for a few months. I was sent one for a review and I got to enjoy it for a little bit before sending it back. This was sort of early years of the YouTube channel, early-ish years of my watch collecting. So at that point, my friends haven't really learned a lesson not to ask me about watches because they will get an answer and I will talk about watches for a long time. Nowadays, no one asks me anymore because they know I can ramble on and on. That's why I have the YouTube channel, so I can talk to you guys. But back then, sometimes people would ask me, oh, what are you wearing? What is this watch? And also they would ask how much that watch is because again, once you get started in watch collecting, you're wearing a watch that costs $5,000, $6,000. It's a big deal. People want to know why. Luckily, with the Snowflake, I could easily explain why this watch costs so much money. First of all, the movement, spring drive movement, a movement that took decades to develop. It has incredible precision. That gliding seconds hand is just fantastic. It's decorated well. It's just a marvel of engineering. Now, I know some people don't really like it and they think it's, too quartzy. It's not actually a quartz movement, but it has the quartz crystal. So some people don't like it because of that. To those people, I'll say, look up some videos, look up some articles about this movement, and I think you will have a deeper level of appreciation for it. The level of accuracy that this movement achieves is just incredible. Besides the movement, you also have an all titanium case that's finished to a level that puts watches in a higher price category with stainless steel cases to shame. Yes, titanium is much harder to finish than stainless steel, yet Grand Seiko figured out a way to finish it to the level that's just, it's punching above its weight class, that's for sure. Besides the finishes and the titanium case, you also get that Zaratsu finish on the set of hands and on the indexes. The indexes feel like they're floating above the dial. That's just how well polished they are. Even the underside of the hands is Zaratsu finished. The side that no one will ever see, Grand Seiko still takes that extra step to finish. And lastly, of course, this dial, the Snowflake dial, the dial that made this watch famous. I think no one in this price category was able to achieve the same level of complexity and visual interest in their dials as Grand Seiko. And even since no one offers the same dials as Grand Seiko, even though it gets a lot of attention, not anymore lately because there are other great Grand Seiko watches, but it did in the past. I think all that attention is deserved because it's a fantastic watch. And once again, if you buy one of these watches, I don't think you will feel like you wasted your money. Moving on, Rolex Sky-Dweller. This model was released in 2012 in a precious metal case and in 2017 in a stainless steel metal case. Now that's the case, that's the watch that I want to talk about. Before we go any further, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, these watches are almost impossible to buy from the AD. They're almost impossible to get at the retail level. However, it's still possible. It is almost impossible, but it is possible. So for the purposes of this video, let's assume that you are able to get it at the retail price of around $13,500 on the Jubilee bracelet. For this price, even though it's very expensive, you get a lot of value. First of all, you get the most complicated movement Rolex has ever made. It's an annual calendar movement with a GMT function. They also created a very clever way to interact with this movement. Usually when you have an annual calendar and the GMT function, you have a bunch of buttons or a bunch of crowns. Not the case here. The movement only gets interacted with and set by using a crown and the clever bezel system. So the bezel actually turns and it's functional in terms of switching between different functions on the movement. Very well engineered, very well designed, and yet the watch is not overly bulky. It gets a nickname of the bigger Datejust because it's sort of what it looks like. It looks like a larger version of a Datejust, especially on the Jubilee bracelet, but the amount of engineering, the type of movement that you get for around $13,500 is actually impressive value for money. Once again, if you're able to buy one at the retail level. On the resale market, of course, these watches are not worth, multiples of the retail price that people are asking. It's just ridiculous. For that money, you can buy some high horology watches. But at the retail price, I think it's one of the best value for money watches in terms of complications, in terms of design, in terms of finishes that you can get on the market. And again, if you were to buy one at the retail price, not considering the resale prices just for what the watch is, I don't think you'd be disappointed. Nomos Tengomat. Now, unlike the Rolex, these watches can actually be scored for way cheaper on the gray market and the resale market. I bought mine years ago for around $1,500. Now I think they're around $2,000, but either way, even if you pay full retail or close to retail price, you're still getting a lot of value. And if you buy one at the gray market, well, you're just getting a killer deal. Let's talk about the dial first. It has this sort of metallic sheen that you will find in watches in a much higher price category. On top of that, you get that attractive German Bauhaus design. You get that Bauhaus design language in terms of the dial, the case, the set of hands that are blued by fire. And you get a display case back if you choose that option, which I strongly recommend you choose the option with the display case back because it would be a shame to hide this movement, the star of the show. Nomos makes their in-house movements, and it's not just some Mickey Mouse movement that's really a copy of an ETA. No, they really know how to put a movement together. It looks amazing. You get some incredible combination of hand and machine finishes. Again, looking at the dial, looking at this movement, looking at the finish on the movement, and this watch should cost around $10,000, but you can score them on the gray market, on the resale market for around $2,200, $2,500 for a very nice example with some warranty. I think Nomos is just leagues above their competition in the same price category. What they offer is hard to find even in watches that are much more expensive. Tudor Black Bay GMT, the stainless steel and gold one. I reviewed this watch a while ago. Actually, one of my best friends owns one and he loves that watch. And there is a very good reason why. It's one of the coolest watches you can get for under $10,000. You can actually find them for under $5,000. The amount of value that you get in this package is hard to beat. And once again, it sort of is a leader in this price category, and among the competition, it really stands out. You get a case and a bracelet that's a combination of a stainless steel and gold. No, you don't get full solid gold links. That would be a little bit too good to be true in this price point, but you do get gold wrapped links, which are almost as good. And if you compare that to other two-tone watches, other two-tone GMT watches, well, this one is just a fraction of the price. It is also a true GMT with an in-house movement that has a local jumping hand and 70 hours of power reserve. You also get 200 meters of water resistance, even more than what you get in a Rolex GMT Master 2. You get a very attractive case design and great finishes and a great dial and a Tudor logo on the dial, which is a sister brand of Rolex, once again for the fraction of the price of a Rolex GMT Master 2. Taking all of that into account and very few negatives, the only real big negative is the thickness of the watch. Other than that, it's almost perfect. I think these Black Bay GMTs offer a lot of value and they punch above their weight class. Anyone who bought one, I think, is pretty happy with their decision. Now, the thickness was the negative for the Tudor Black Bay GMT. It is not a negative for our next watch, Bulgari Octo Finissimo Ultra Thin in titanium. Now, this one is a very crazy looking watch. It became sort of an instant classic, of course, based on the Octo Finissimo watches that came out in the early 2000s. But this one here was refined and redesigned for 2017 release. It actually became the watch of the year for that year. It won numerous awards. And in my opinion, in a few years, we will look back at this watch as a modern classic, a watch that really changed the game. One of the biggest achievements of this watch, besides a very attractive design, is of course its thinness. It's only 5 millimeters thick. In fact, when this watch was released, it was the thinnest automatic case watch that you could buy on the market. It was a leader. Now there is, I think, a Richard Mille that's slightly thinner but costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, something like that. This one here can be scored on a gray market for under $10,000 on a leather strap and under $15,000 on a titanium bracelet. Speaking of the titanium, the case is made out of this bead blasted grade 5 titanium. It's feather light on the wrist. I actually did try one on a few years ago and I really loved how this watch felt. It felt like you're wearing nothing. It felt like second skin on your wrist. And a lot of times with watches like this, you would think, it's a bit of a gimmick, it's very thin, what's the point? But I think this watch is so much more than just a gimmick. The movement is super impressive. It has a micro rotor. It's powered by the BVL 138 automatic movement with 36 joules and an impressive 55 hours of power reserve. For a watch this thin, you would forgive it for having 30 hours of power reserve, but no, it has a proper 55 hours of power. It also has a very attractive design. Even though the watch is very simple and thin, it has a very complicated shape, very Gerald Genta-esque because it's based on the designs of Gerald Genta. It has a little bit of a AP Royal Oak, it has a little bit of a Patek Nautilus in it, but it does its own thing. It's not really an homage to anything. And I think at this price point, around $15,000 for what you get, it's one of the best value for money watches on the market, period. I would really love to own one because I think from an engineering standpoint, it's super impressive. From a design standpoint, it's super impressive. And actually from the wearability, it's very impressive. So it's not only this piece of art that you just keep in your watch box, but you can actually wear it, you can actually enjoy it, and you can daily this beautiful timepiece. Longines Master Collection Complete Calendar Chronograph with the Moonphase. Now, if you're looking for complications and you're looking for affordability, I think this watch has to be on top of anyone's list. It packs so many complications for an affordable price that I'm actually kind of surprised how they're even able to do it. Yes, the movement is based on the ETA chronograph movement. They did add some modules, but nevertheless, it still is a very complicated watch and all the complications work properly, and it does have a fairly reliable movement, and there is servicing history for these watches now. They're great. So what type of complications do you get? A chronograph, day, date, months, AM, PM indicator, and a Moonphase. All of that sounds like high horology. All of that sounds like tens of thousands of dollars, but you can score these watches on a gray market for around $2,500. Yes, you heard that right. $2,500. That's the price of a tax on AP Royal Oak that you would pay in most states and provinces in US and Canada. You get a whole watch with all these complications for that price. Now, a lot of times when these watches pack all the complications and the specs, the watch itself is kind of shit, Not the case here. It actually has a pretty nice attractive shape. It's very wearable, 14.5 millimeters thick, a bit on the thicker side, but if you look at it as a automatic chronograph with all these complications, all of a sudden 14.5 millimeters is very reasonable. It also comes on an alligator leather strap, kind of cool, with a butterfly double push deployment clasp, which you would find in watches that are in a way higher price point. All of that for around 2,500 bucks. That's a really, really good price and something that's just incredible. I think this watch deserves a lot more attention that it's been getting. And finally, the last watch on this list is Oris Aqua's Caliber 400. It's a diver that's worth your hard-earned money, or at the very least, it's worth a consideration. When these watches just came out, they were a bit on the expensive side. They were sort of competing with Tudor Black Bay 58 and these type of watches with some Breitling watches. Basically, they were about $4,500. Now you can score them on a gray market for around $2,000. Not exactly cheap, but you get a lot of value. You get 300 meters of water resistance, a stainless steel case, a ceramic bezel insert, a stainless steel bracelet with a diver's extension, a display case back even, basically all the bells and whistles that you would expect from the big boys. But you also get an automatic Caliber 400 in-house movement. This movement has 5 days or 120 hours of power reserve. Now that's the only watch in its class that has such long power reserve. You also can score these watches now for around $2,500 on a gray market on a stainless steel bracelet, or around $2,000 on the rubber strap. I think that's one hell of a deal. Again, $2,000 is a lot of money, but for what you get with this watch is just incredible. It's another one of these watches that punches well above its weight class and I think deserves your consideration. And that's it. That's my list of 10 expensive watches that don't suck. In fact, they're really worth buying or at least looking into. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what watches I missed. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this video in the future, and your comments will really help with the shaping of that video. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye.